Welcome to Bhatt and Bhatt Tutorials. I am Sheshadri. This session is for 10th grade ICSE English, and the chapter we are doing is Chief Seattle's speech. Yes, students, this is the part 2 of the same chapter. We had completed up to the 6th paragraph and in part 1. So let us see, before we continue with the chapter, let us briefly recall what we discussed in the previous session for the same lesson. Now in the beginning, Chief Seattle is pointing out the big change in socio-political status of his tribe under the American administration, and assures the governor of Washington that he will stand by all his commitments. If you remember, he says his word is as sure as the sun is rising and the sun setting. The sun never fails. So he says, the way the sun doesn't fail or the seasons don't fail, my word also is, my commitment is so sure, so firm. That's what he says. Then he goes on to say, Chief Seattle does not approve of the armed confrontation with the colonials, which was taken up by the younger Red Indians. He actually blames the younger Red Indians, saying that they are impulsive and they react suddenly without thinking of what the future will be. And then when he says that he is ready to accept the terms which the Americans are ready to offer him, he is sure that the President of the US will protect his tribe, the Suquamish, from other hostile Red Indian tribes. He names 2 tribes. The Haidas and the Timshians. So he says, he just gives the name of 2 tribes and says, our people and our women have to be protected from them. He says, since we are agreeing to your terms and conditions, you also ensure that we are also protected. Then he comes out very categorically about the differences in perception of religion between the Red Indians' method of worship and Christianity. And of course, for all the violence that has happened so far, he seems to blame even God. He says God himself has been partial to us. He has been very favorable to the Europeans or to the colonial settlers, whereas to the Red Indians, he has forsaken them. I mean, he's forgotten them. Okay. Then the last thing that he tells in the next thing was, he explains to the governor that the Red Indians' ancestors are never forgotten because they always protect and bless their descendants. It is like, their tradition where they feel that the spirit of the ancestors is always present in that area. So he says, you may forget your ancestors, you may leave your land and come, but we don't forget our ancestors. We are always there, because we know that somewhere in the middle of the night or early dawn, our ancestors' spirits come and they bless us and they give us guidance on how to live our life. So this was where we had stopped the previous session. Let us move on to see what he is saying next. Okay, this is the 7th paragraph. It says, day and night cannot dwell together. The red man has ever fled the approach of the white man, as the morning mist flees before the morning sun. See, he has been rationalizing the differences of the lifestyle between the Red Indians and the Europeans, or Europeans who have now become Americans. He says just they are as different from each other as day and night. Night starts only when day is over. So he says it is as distinct as they are as separate as day and night, which cannot live together. And the other example he is given us, the red man has ever fled the approach of the white man as the morning mist flees the morning sun. You have this morning fog, every morning you generally find it, particularly on cold mornings. But as soon as the sun rises, because the moisture evaporates, and as though it is as though nothing was there. So he says the red man has actually run away from the white man, and they have even tried to avoid them whenever they have come. That's what he means. That we actually cannot live together. That's why he says, just like day and night cannot dwell together, we also cannot live together. That is the point he is trying to make. And he says, however, your proposition seems fair, and I think my people will accept it and will retire to the reservation you offer them. Dear students, the areas that were earmarked for the Red Indians, they were called reservations. They are called. Even now, like I said in the previous class also, these Red Indian reservations are there even today. And these reservations have got their own rules. The tribe that is there in the reservation, that controls all the activity. They are the law. Now the United States government has given them that kind of freedom. Any casino, for example, they have many places. They have these casinos where all this gambling and all that official gambling takes place. The entire revenue from the casino goes directly to the tribal people, to these Red Indians, and the government gets a very small amount of the share. So it is like that. So that is the reservation he is talking of. So here he says, your proposition seems fair. So he is ready to convince his people that whatever the settlers are now offering, that they will buy up the land on which these Red Indians were there, and second, some separate areas will totally be given for their own use. So he says, and what you are proposing seems fair, and see, it seems just, it seems the right thing to do. That's what he's saying. And he says, I will convince my people that we accept it. So that's what he's coming to. In fact, it was for these things, for this reconciliatory approach, which Chief Seattle spoke, because he's not talking of violence. He's talking of how to live together and how to do it in peace without any furthermore bloodshed. Okay, then he says, then we will dwell apart in peace. For the words of the great white chief seems to be the words of nature speaking to my people out of dense darkness. These people, they in many forms actually worshipped nature. The trees, rain, fire, and what they call as the Great Spirit. So many elements of nature itself were their items of worship. So he says, the words that the great white chief, he is referring to the governor here. It is the governor who has made the offer that will buy the land. He says, it is like words of nature speaking out of dense darkness. So this is like a silver lining to the cloud, and that seems to be a. He says it is like a remedy for a cure. It is a cure for some disorder that we have. So he is accepting that. And of course, throughout this speech, there is one thing which we can note. He is definitely in great sorrow. He has great grief thinking of his past. So many times he asserts that he repeats those things where he is talking of the past glory and where he is talking of the present and the future. So with that he says, it matters little where we pass the remnant of our days. They will not be many. You see, this is like somebody who is saying that it is almost as the entire Red Indian tribe itself is going to be wiped out. But in reality, they were not wiped out. They restricted themselves to the reservations, and they are there even today. Very much part of the United States. The old Red Indians, they are very much there, but they are not. Their prominence in the society or their command over the land was not as it was before the Europeans moved into that place. So he says, but Chief Seattle says, it is as though as it is a doomsday. He says, the Indian's night promises to be dark. Not a single star of hope hovers above his horizon. There is absolutely dark. There's not a single star. There is not a single ray of hope that the Indian can have. Sad voiced winds moan in the distance. It is as though the wind, the breeze itself is moaning, or it is as though their ancestors are physically looking at what is happening, and through the winds, they are all sad. So, which was truly the state of affairs at that point of time, because they had not foreseen that this is going to happen. A grim fate seems to be on the red man's trail, and wherever he will hear the approaching footsteps of his fell destroyer, and prepare stolidly to meet his doom. And as does the wounded doe that hears the approaching footsteps of the hunter. He says, we need to realize, or the Red Indians need to realize, that our fate itself is bad. Our time is very bad. The example he is giving is a wounded doe, a deer that has been wounded by let's say a hunter, and it has fallen to the ground. And the moment it hears footsteps, it knows that its end has come. So similarly, whenever Red Indians see more and more of these Europeans moving in, they also will feel like that wounded doe that knows that the end has come. So basically he's saying, all good days of the Red Indians are over. So it is going to be, in fact, bad from now on. Which is to a certain extent true, because they don't have the autonomy which they had. They don't have the freedom which they had before. They will be restricted to some particular areas only. So he is continuing to list out in various ways how the end of the Red Indians has come. A few more moons, a few more winters, and not one of the descendants of the mighty hosts that once moved over this broad land or lived in happy homes, protected by the Great Spirit, will remain to mourn over the graves of a people once more powerful and hopeful than yours. Ultimately, he is saying, though they were defeated so many times by the Europeans in the small battles that they had, he still says that at one point of time the Red Indians were much more powerful than what the Europeans are today. And he says, a few more moons and a few more winters. You have the full moon once a month, and you have the new moon once a month. So he is calling off a few more years. He says, and their belief, he always, it is their firm belief that their ancestors are always in the vicinity. They are in the neighborhood, and they keep watching, and they keep moving over this land. And he is talking of lived in happy homes, the happy lives that they had before all this bloodshed happened. He remembers that. So none of those descendants will be there to mourn over the graves of the people once more hopeful, powerful and hopeful than yours. So at the bottom of his heart, he still feels they are better than the Europeans, or they are more powerful. But only thing is, in the beginning also he admits they have been vastly outnumbered. Their numbers are very small compared to the number of Europeans that are there, or the settlers that are there. Okay. Then he is reconciling the fact to himself. But why should I mourn at the untimely fate of my people? Tribe follows tribe. So he is like, he is consoling himself. Why should I mourn at the untimely fate of my people? And the reason he is calling it untimely is, it was never planned. The founding of the land by Christopher Columbus, this happened by chance. And once the new land was found, then it is all these Europeans who started coming into it, followed by a majority of the Britishers. Which is, tribe follows tribe and nation follows nation, like the waves of the sea. It is the order of nature, and regret is useless. So he is also aware that good things don't last forever. There is a rise and there is a fall. So he is comparing it to the waves of the sea. One tribe will be more powerful than the other tribe. One nation will be more powerful than the other nation. So similarly is the case like this, and he giving the example like the waves of the sea. You have a high tide and a low tide. You have a large wave which ultimately descends and goes back to normal level. So he says it is the order of nature. He says these are natural cycles that happen. So having unnecessary sorrow about it and regret is useless. So though he is mourning, though he is grieving, he is also giving some consolatory statements here. But he is giving a warning to them, a kind of warning. He says, your time of decay may be distant, but it will surely come. For even the white man whose God has walked and talked with him as friend to friend cannot be exempt from common destiny. He says, what has happened to us will eventually happen to you as well. So it is not that whatever is nature happens only to us, it will happen to you also. So he says, it may be far away, your time of decay may be distant, but he is 100% sure that your time of descent also will come. He says, we may be brothers after all, we will see. Brothers means, in that case we are brothers. I am suffering, I have suffered, I am suffering. At a future point of time, when your fate orders that, you also will have a bad time. That's what he is predicting. Wars which are there, wars again, the wars happened and millions of people got killed in the world wars. We have seen that. So what he has said has already partly come true after what he said, because he is talking this in 1854 in the 19th century. But in the 20th century, when the world wars happened, millions and millions of lives were lost. So in a way, he has spoken about the future in this. Okay. We will ponder your proposition, and when we decide, we will let you know. So the governor has given him an offer saying, we will buy your land and we will give you a reservation. So he says, in our tribes, we will discuss on your proposition, and when we decide, we will let you know. But should we accept it, I here and now make this condition that we will not be denied the privilege without molestation of visiting at any time the tombs of our ancestors, friends, and children. Every part of the soil is sacred in the estimation of our people. He is giving this as a condition. He is laying a conditionality there. Okay, I will discuss your proposals with my people in the tribe, and we will let you know. But he says, if we accept it, this is the one condition that at any point of time, even in areas where you are there, or the Britishers are there, or colonials are there, or Europeans are there, or Americans, and now that they have become Americans, he says, our right to visit the graves of our ancestors should always be given to us. Every part of the soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. See, they are really nature lovers. They are, what should we say, environment conscious people. There was no automobile. There were no sources of pollution. So they lived a very, what should I say, green kind of a life. So that is why every part of the land is sacred for them. Every part of the soil is sacred in the estimation of my people. So he says we should have that permission to go wherever we want to go to visit. Suppose somebody's grave is there, he says you cannot forbid me from coming to that place just because you are staying in that place. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some sad or happy event in days long vanished. Hallowed means made sacred. It's very sacred to us. Every hill, every valley, every plain and grove. Maybe they practice maybe even shifting agriculture, where for certain parts of the year they lived in one part of the country, later shifted, maybe they had the shifting pattern of agriculture in those times because irrigation and all those systems were not there. So he says every place is sacred for us. So and we should have the rights to visit that place. Even the rocks which seem to be dumb and dead as the swelter in the sun along the silent shore thrill with memories of stirring events connected with the lives of my people, and the very dust upon which you now stand responds more lovingly to their footsteps than yours, because it is rich with the blood of our ancestors, and our bare feet are conscious of the sympathetic touch. Those were rough times. They never used footwear, and they all traveled bare feet. So he says, it is not just the trees, even the rocks, which is supposed to be a non-living thing, which seems to be as dumb and dead. It is a dead thing, but even that is thrilling with memories of stirring events. And he says, this soil on which you are now moving, your footsteps are now moving, our feet are more, caring towards that same soil on which you are now treading. You have already encroached on my land, but the soil responds more lovingly to our footsteps than yours. That's what he's saying. So, true nature lovers and true environmentally conscious people, those days the word environment and all the environmental degradation, all the greenhouse gases, those things were not there. So they lived a very environmentally good life, and which is why nature itself was kind of every part of nature was sacred for them. Our departed braves fond mothers, glad, happy-hearted maidens, and even the little children who lived here and rejoiced here for a brief season will now these somber solitudes, and at eventide they greet shadowy returning spirits. This concept that their ancestors always visit them, they firmly believe that. They believe that somebody's grandfather or great grandfather, his spirit comes and talks to him. So that's why he says, our departed braves, the people who have fought with the other tribes to protect their own tribe, or even fought here many times with the Europeans to safeguard their land. The other family, the other parts of the family, fond mothers, glad, happy-hearted maidens, I mean, girls who are not yet married, and even kids. They will really enjoy the situation where the returning spirits will come and visit them and they can talk to them. That's why he says our access should not be limited. And he says, when the last red man shall have perished and the memory of my tribe shall have become a myth among the white men, these shores will swarm with the invisible dead of my tribe. And when your children's children think themselves alone in the field, the store, the shop, upon the highway, or in the silence of the pathless woods, they will not be alone. So their concept that there is life after death, that concept is very much there. So it is just the body going away and the soul is forever there. So he says, even after all of us have gone, your children's children, that is your grandchildren, they will not be alone. They will always be there. In every part, he says, in the field, in the store, shop, or on the highway, or in the silence of the pathless woods, in forests, they will be there, guiding you. And it is not that they are going to haunt these places. They are only wishing everybody good. The people who have gone always have a good wish upon the people who are still living. That is their firm belief. In all the earth, there is no place dedicated to solitude. Solitude is peace. At night, when the streets of your cities and villages are silent and you think them deserted, they will throng with the returning hosts that once filled them and still love this beautiful land. So you are all, generally people will be sleeping. Say in the middle of the night, say one in the night or 2 in the night is when he says, when all cities and villages are silent, it is the spirits who will be there. The white man will never be alone. He says these spirits will always be there. Okay, so that is why he says, if for a grave we want to come and visit, you should let us do that. Okay, it's almost the end of the lesson with this. He says, let him be just and deal kindly with my people, for the dead are not powerless. So he says, let the white man be just, let him do it with justice and deal well with my people. For he says, the dead are not powerless, means the dead spirits are also there. Dead, did I say there is no death, only a change of world. That's what. The physical body goes away, but the soul remains. It is like changing clothes. Even the Bhagavad Gita, even Hindu culture says that death is only, it is only a very temporary kind of a change. The soul is not born, nor does it die. So what happens after death? You enter another body. That is what is the firm belief, the sign belief even they had. So he says there is no death, only a change of worlds. So this brings us to the end of this chapter. Okay, there is a footnote here. It says version 1, which appeared in the Seattle Sunday Star on October 29, 1887, in a column by Dr. Henry Esmond. Actually, he spoke this in 1854, but he would have spoken in a much more ancient kind of a language or their local English at that point of time. Many versions were there, but this seems to be the most authentic version which appeared in 1887. So with this, we come to the end of Chief Seattle's speech. Any doubts, please call us on these numbers, or you can send a message on the Bhatt and Bhatt Tutorials mobile app chat section. Thank you.